Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Rise Above TV, where we are empowering humanity and supporting unity. You're watching Good Grief, where we're meeting loss with presence, one wave at a time. Hosted by Janie Terraz, the mindfulness coach, and Kelvin Chin, an internationally recognized author, meditation expert, and grief and death guide with over 50 years of experience, helping people navigate life's most profound questions. He is the founder and executive director of the Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundation, the Turning Within Meditation Foundation, and kelvinchin.org, nonprofit platforms dedicated to reducing fear, deepening inner peace, and empowering individuals to live more fully in the present moment. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Good Grief, where we are meeting loss with presence, one wave at a time. We are here with the awesome Kelvin, ready to do another episode. Hi, Kelvin. How are you doing today?
Hey, Janie. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So before we started recording, we knew what we ended with on the last episode, and it was about the story of you almost dying when you almost drowned. And the show is about grief, and that's something, and death and all this stuff, right? So we knew we wanted to go into that topic. However, because of what's going on in the world and just the amount of like agony and suffering and division and just dis-ease, right, with all that's happening in the world, we didn't want to turn a blind eye and just like jump right into it. It just made sense to us to address it to some degree and even like do a little prayer, and the show being about grief and us being able to hold space for our sadness and our anger and our frustration and just the amount of like agony and suffering and division and just dis-ease, right, with all that's happening in the world. We didn't want to turn a blind eye.
You may or may not know that I'm a meditation teacher, and I've been teaching meditation for many, many years. And a subset of that, or a part of that, is that I've been teaching meditation in the military. When I was in my 20s, I taught the first meditation courses at West Point Military Academy in the U.S. and in South Korea, on all the U.S. Army bases and Air Force bases. I taught meditation in the U.S. military and so forth. And I've taught a lot of vets coming back from the Iraq War, vets, contractors, military contractors, etc. And um, and some people know that I have past life memories, having been involved in various military campaigns. So Janie and I were talking, and we thought we should start this session off with a recognition of the Iran war that's going on. Again, people are debating, is it a war? Because Congress hasn't, declared that it's a war, but our president is calling it a war. But people are dying, and there is fighting going on. So call it whatever you want legally, but it's a war. People are dying, and there are losses happening. And not only are people dying in the Middle East, tragically, in many countries, um, in many cultures, and people of many religions are dying, not just one religion, uh, but also people in the rest of the world are experiencing loss because of that conflict that's going on in the Middle East. So you don't have to be living in the Middle East to experience the loss. You could be experiencing it uh, anywhere, and you don't have to have military family members who are involved in the conflict either. Everybody is psychologically and emotionally experiencing some level of loss of security, loss of feeling of stability and safety. Those are all losses, and any loss is a source of grief, as we've discussed in previous sessions together here.
Yes.
So we thought we would start just with a recognition of those losses of various kinds. Just have a moment of silence with everybody, and I'll say a few words while we close our eyes together for a minute. Turn within. So we can just be within ourselves for a minute. Let our mind flow to wherever it goes. Whether it goes to what I was just speaking about or whether it goes to something else, it doesn't matter. Just let the mind go where it wants to go. Don't force the mind to try to feel peaceful, and don't force the mind to try to quiet itself and have fewer thoughts. Just let the mind be in whatever state it is. Let the mind experience its own connection with itself in that non-judgmental way. Perhaps even allowing our mind, our conscious mind, to experience and touch its larger sense of itself in this very easy, natural, effortless way. Slowly open the eyes now. For those of you who are interested, curious, that's how Jesus taught us to meditate 2,000 years ago when we were with him. I have taken what I learned from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and I've made it even easier. That type of meditation that Jesus, we called prayer, but it was a form of meditation, really, not a form of asking for anything, but a form of a state of being with one's own mind and expanding one's own consciousness to experience the vastness of our own mind, of each individual's mind, which he referred to as experiencing heaven on earth. So that's really the derivation of those phrases. But I wanted to just say a few words about cruelty, because what's going on in the Middle East are various forms of cruelty, in my opinion. And people may wonder, well, Kelvin, you got this book out there, After the Afterlife, and you have all these lifetimes as a military leader and a general and a military warrior. But I've always looked, and if you look at that book carefully, read it carefully, and read between the lines of what I'm saying about my experiences, is that I've learned from my experiences over the millennia, over the 6,000 or 8,000 years that my memories go back, and I've changed who I am in the current moment at that time, wherever the current moment was in the past, and now the current moment is 2026. So I'm not the same person who would make those choices and take those risks in order to risk myself and other people's biological lives. And we're going to talk today a little bit together, and we're going to segue and talk, as Janie mentioned, talk about near-death experiences and what happens after we biologically die, at least what seems to happen based on many, many millions of people's experiences in terms of NDEs, near-death experiences. My experience is that I have changed over the millennia, and that this notion that I refer to today as cruelty is not a pathway to happiness. It is a short-term pathway to happiness for people who are insecure lacking confidence, what do? They bully others. Because when the bully feels insecure, what does the bully do to make him or herself happier? Is to make other people around them less happy, make them sad, make them cower, make them fearful, make them feel weak, because the
Hmm.
bully himself or herself, and it's gender non-specific.
Oh, yes. Oh,
I've
yes.
experienced bullying this lifetime by women,
Yes.
is they make themselves feel better by making other people feel worse. Now, so
Mm.
you could say that's a pathway to happiness, and it is. Ironically, it's how the bully gets happiness. But it's a to me a distorted way of getting happiness. Because why? Because you surround yourself with more people who are miserable, which is
Yes.
going on right now in the Middle East, if you think
Yeah.
about
It's like the degenerative ways in which we can live life and perceive life and operate from. And I call it like that, that superiority inferiority operating system, where at one point it's like you're one position or the other, but a lot of these people and the way the world, the direction that the world has been going for quite some time because we've been severed and sort of like desecrated, right, in a lot of ways, and we've disconnected and got dysregulated and are operating from disharmony because we're not
it. Right.
dialed into the wholeness of like what you just took us
Well,
to. And
exactly.
that's a practice in itself. But once you can do that, you're literally in a state of equanimity and like true heaven on earth. That's what this Pasmesa thing is. Pasmesa is peace within. We've lost reverence for
So,
life.
but it's connection with oneself first,
Yes.
because one cannot feel really connected with others
No.
when one is disconnected from oneself. And
Yes.
so, and then the way I teach meditation, so just for people who don't know me,
Yeah.
haven't taken my classes, what I did in that little meditation thing we did at the beginning is not what I teach. That's not the technique that I teach, because the technique I teach gets you from point A to point B. If you're stressed out and you're feeling like your mind is swamped with thoughts, you cannot push thoughts out. That's not a way to connect with yourself. And
Right.
most meditation techniques, my experience has been, are 99% different from what I teach. And most of them are actually divorcing your mind from your connection with yourself by
Yeah.
trying to force your mind to be quiet, to be not thinking, to be clearing the mind of thoughts, to be focused on some candle or some mandala or mantra or whatever.
Yeah.
And any kind of focusing is divorcing your mind from allowing the mind to be in whatever state it is. Now, that's not the technique that I teach, but I teach a technique that's consistent with that. But to
Right.
your point, Janie, we never will feel this greater compassion and connection with all things intimate and inanimate in the universe if we continue to be divorced from our own self, from our conscious mind, meaning that what I mean by that is our conscious mind being divorced from this larger sense of our mind, that Houston Astrodome, the football stadium part of our mind that we've talked about in previous sessions, and
Yes.
still think that we're in this limited little 8-inch bucket part of our conscious thinking mind. To the extent that we continue down that road, continues to promote what, to paraphrase what you were saying earlier, I call it the importance of being important. This
Mm.
higher, lower, who's better, all of that. It's the importance of being important. And we keep
Hierarchy.
the hierarchical stuff. We keep shifting that around. Sometimes I'm better than you, sometimes you're better than me. No, to the extent that we keep doing that, continues to promote this sense of confidence and stability within oneself, which to me is the seed, it is the source of cruelty in the world.
Thank you. Exacto mundo. It's the center, the seed of suffering, where
Yeah,
it's like as long as and listen, there is individualism, right? And we are like a separate, but there is a piece of us that is not. It's completely interconnected with all things. That's that universality piece, right? Where it's like the invisible us that's connected to all things, but then you got your physical body and it looks like we got these borders.
Yeah,
But
the,
at the
the
end,
way I describe that is like you'll hear people in this context use the ocean a lot as an example. And I say, yes, yes, we're all part of the same ocean, you could say. However, we do not lose ourselves when we connect with the ocean of others. We
thank you.
the molecule of water is still a water molecule when it's coming from a stream or a river or the rain or whatever. However, it gets connected with the ocean, it is still a water molecule. It doesn't lose its water molecule-ness, if that's a word.
Yeah, but I love when people use words like that because I understand what you're talking about,
Yeah,
Liz.
but there's a connection still in individuality.
Thank you.
It's not a losing of oneself. So let's segue from this, Janie, to talk
Yes.
about NDEs because some people
Yes.
are thinking, "Oh, I don't have any experiences like that. What are you talking about?"
Uh-huh.
So why don't we talk about NDEs a little bit because so many tens of millions of people have had near-death experiences.
Yeah, and it really does kind of connect, like even with what we were saying, because Yeshua was like, hey guys, like we're hybrids. Like heaven, the kingdom of heaven is within you. You must go within. One of my favorite sayings, really quick, is if you bring forth what is within you, it will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, it will destroy you. It's in like the Gospel of Thomas somewhere. And I love that because for me, it's like you got to go in and understand all the parts of the mind and the subconscious mind and what has shaped your identity, but also get really curious about the parts of you that are not temporary. The part of you that we said before in another episode, that eternality and the temporality, and we're both things at the same time. And when you inner over understand them and you integrate them and you get them working for your greater good, like, game over here. Like now you really are mastering, like you're sort of, and when I don't say that as in like a master slave kind of superiority, inferiority, it's like I'm better than you. No, it's like, hey, our mind and our brains and our bodies and our soul and our heart can learn how to become friends and work together.
The
That's a
balance,
process.
the word I use is balance.
There you go. Yeah, balance, harmony. It's like the scales, like where the left brain and the right brain, they're not fighting against each other anymore. So, anyway, that's also like the piece of us that's invisible and the visible, and they're no longer fighting against one another. And there are people that when they have these experiences where they die, some people for like long periods of time, and then they come back, and what they would say would be the cause of like brain damage and not being able to talk or whatever, and they're perfectly fine. Like there's all these incredible stories, and you happen to be one of those people. I'm excited to
Let's
hear
talk
about
about
this.
what near-death experiences are. I'm going to read.
Yes.
I This is my first book, Overcoming the Fear of Death, and in it, I talk about four different belief systems. One of which is the science belief, which is they don't believe in an afterlife, and I talk about another belief system, which is they believe in an afterlife, but there's fear, and there's a third belief system, which is a belief in an afterlife and maybe looking forward to it, but no fear. And that's where I talk about near-death experiences here. And then the fourth belief system is reincarnation and past lives, which we'll get into in our next session together. But this one, I'll talk about near-death experiences here. In this particular section of my book, um, I researched it, and here's the commonly known definition, the commonly accepted definition of NDEs, which stands for near-death experiences. NDEs are experiences that an individual has that is associated with impending death. Impending death means they're almost about to die, right? Biologically, with
Hmm.
impending death, which can encompass any combination of multiple possible sensations, including mental detachment from the body. Remember from my story last session, that's what I experienced. Mental detachment from the body, and you can experience any combination of these. In mental detachment from the body, feelings of levitation or lightness, being at peace or total serenity, feeling safe or secure, warmth, and the presence of light. So those are just a half a dozen of the many possible. There are more combinations of other possible sensations and experiences you can have, but those are some of the more common ones that people generally have. And then individually, you can have all kinds of other experiences. Oh, I was in heaven. Oh, I talked to Jesus. Oh, I talked to Muhammad. I talked to Buddha or whatever. Or talked to my dead grandmother or my grandfather or whoever who had just died. There's all many different individual variations on those half a dozen themes. According to a Gallup poll conducted in 1992, that's the most recent one I could find. I wrote my book in 2015. But the most recent Gallup poll that was conducted on this topic, 13 million Americans reported having had an NDE. At that time, that was 5% of the US population. Similar statistics have been conducted, statistical studies have been conducted in other countries with similar statistical results in other countries. So about 5%. So if that was today, we get about 330 million people. That's like 17 million Americans in the United States would have reported 17 million reporting they've had a near-death experience like that. That's reported. I'm not one of those. I never told them my so it's probably twice that.
Yep, it's
Easily,
higher for
easily
sure.
much higher than that. It's probably two or three times higher than 5%. It's probably closer to 10, 15% of people have had a near-death experience like that. And
Mm-hmm.
many of whom, like myself, have never reported it to anybody.
True.
But there's all different variations on these unusual experiences that people have. They're on the surgery, they're died medically on the surgery table, literally in the surgery room. They're in the hospital, and they die, and the people tell them, they come back. The biologically dead person obviously did not die completely. They come back from death and they tell people, the doctors, what everybody was saying and who was saying what to whom and so forth. And some of the doctors kind of dismiss it, saying, well, maybe the anesthesia wore off and so forth and so on. But then if you talk to the anesthesiologist, there's no way because of the dosage was so high and so forth and so on. So, and doctors sometimes will dismiss these experiences by saying it's a biochemical reaction in the brain and so forth and so on. But I have had friends of mine, and I talk about a couple of them in the book, examples, who've had near-death experience that were very inexplicable. One had his tonsils out, and that's usually not a high-risk surgery. And the surgery went fine, but he went home and his mom gave him, he was 8 years old at the time, and his mom gave him a whole bunch of chocolate chip cookies to eat because she felt badly for him. And then some of them were like over baked, so like too crispy, and they ripped out his sutures in the back of his throat, and now he's hemorrhaging on the living room floor. And the doctor came and so forth. And my friend Henry said he felt so at peace. He couldn't understand. He could see his mom freaking out, but he was like on the ceiling watching his mom, so forth and so on. They took him to the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, he lived to tell the story to me when we were in college. And then another friend died when he was in his 50s in the hospital, um, after he was in the emergency room. He was in that stage of the hospital where you're kind of being observed before they release you, whatever they
Mm-hmm.
call that. And he coded, and his heart stopped, everything, and he was dead for 20 minutes. So that's not the usual. NDEs usually don't last that long. Usually,
Yes.
if you're not breathing and you have no oxygen for 4 to 6 minutes, I looked this up from my book,
Yeah.
4 to 6 minutes, then you come back. If you come back at all, you come back with brain damage or some issues. And he came back after 20 minutes. And they know that it was 20 minutes because I've talked to one of the doctors,
Mm-hmm.
seen the records, his doctor, his personal physician. I've had dinner with the personal physician a couple times. And a friend of ours was sitting in the room with Jay when Jay coded. And she went in the hallway and screamed that, he coded. And then everybody came, the 8 or 10 doctors and nurses. And they screamed when he came back into his body after 20 minutes because they kept saying that they kept looking at their watch to give the official time of death for the death certificate.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
she was getting whispers from the other side. Our mutual friend Diane Rousseau, she was getting whispers from the other side saying, no, no, he's coming. He's going to come back. So she just said something like, I think his hand moved. And then they would come and check him again and da 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 da. That kept delaying them from officially declaring him biologically dead. And then he sat up in his bed like in a sci-fi movie, he
Yeah,
just
like Frankenstein.
like Frankenstein, he sat up in the bed and he said, Diane, where am I? And who are all these people and why are they here? He had completely spaced out and forgot that he was had been in the hospital. He
Wow.
was out in space, he said, and told me
Seriously.
he saw a huge star field of more stars than he's ever seen in the darkest night in the woods and outside Seattle where he lived. And
Wow.
uh, and then he started coming back because he heard some the phrase that I would never use that Jay used. He said he heard some lilting music, Lilting. I don't think I've ever said that word before in my life. He said, I heard some lilting music and he liked it. It's an example of free will, of how desire is a choice. And
Yes.
so his mind was choosing. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to choose to go back to Earth. He liked the music, and that desire of liking the music made his mind start going back towards Earth from being in. He just said he felt like he was in outer space. So he didn't feel like some NDEs, they'll describe like, oh, I'm in heaven, I'm in a field of light. He
Yep.
did not experience that. So these are different variations on the same NDE type experience. And it
Right.
slammed into his body.
That's incredible. And that just goes back to proving the other point around individualisticness and how your own mental scape, right? Like your inner scape, your psyche, and how it interfaces with that realm. And so it's going to impact like the experience and the way you will see it and or feel it. But when it comes to feeling and or some of the things that they learn, a lot of those things connect.
Yeah,
That's
a
what I
lot
love so
of
much about.
similarities. Right. Those
Go.
similarities in terms of the expansion, and then in many cases, the experience of light. He did not have that, and I did not have that, but many people do have the
Hmm.
experience of light. And I've had many experiences of the light experience in heaven separate from my NDE. But
Mm.
that experience of light, but like you said, it's experienced through the individual's filter. So some people will experience, Yeshua, some people will experience Muhammad, Buddha, their
Krishna, like,
Krishna, who knows who. Some people will, it's their grandmother, their grandfather, they'll speak with their grandfather, speak with a light being. Now, many people have had this light being experience, and because they may be Christian, they assume that that is either Jesus or God. If they believe in God, they assume that this powerful light being is God. So
yes,
the assumption tends to be through the filter of the belief system of that person. So I'm
yes,
not denigrating that. I'm just explaining how these things can happen.
yeah.
Um, but there's one interesting experience that I heard about this guy in San Francisco who had a near-death experience. And he was there in what we will call heaven or the afterlife
Hmm.
with two different light beings. One of them he recognized because they can take on a form you can recognize if they want to show you a form,
Yeah.
because they're just energy and light, but they're individual. They're individualized, so there's not a cosmic soup, like I say. So
Hmm.
there's two different light beings. One was his guru who had died, and the other person, he didn't know who that other being was. It was like an angelic being, what I call an angelic, what I refer to as angelic beings.
Hmm.
I mean, some people will call their dead grandmother an angelic being, and that's okay. But I'm not. There's no right and wrong about this because they're
Right.
all light beings.
Hmm.
I refer to as angelic beings who've never been in physical biological form
Hmm.
before. So
Right.
he had one of those beings and his dead guru, and they were arguing with each other about whether he should come back or whether we should go to heaven. And his guru was telling him he should come back because he has work to do and da 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 da. You got to complete some projects or who knows what he was, whatever. And then the other light being, this powerful angelic light being, is telling him, no, 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 no. You just come here and everything will be fine. You don't have to deal with blah, 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 blah. And so the two light beings on the other side having an argument about what this guy should do. So this is an teaching example. I tell my students that you got to make up your own mind. You don't just listen blindly to anything that anybody says. And here's an example of two of them who don't agree with each other.
Exacto mundo. And even that is like again an extension of his own psyche, right? Like in a kind of a cool way. Like he goes to the other side and it's this like reckoning that he still ends up having to make the decision like which one
Yeah,
am I going to listen to? Which one am I going
yeah.
to
And
listen to?
he obviously, it's obviously which
Yeah.
choice he made. So he came back. But, it's like you hear so many people who automatically like, and this is a mistake, I think, with people with NDEs. They'll say they had an NDE, they went to the other side. Sometimes you're shown a life review, like your life up to that point, and say, "Go, this is what your life, and here's the consequences." And just as like, look at what the consequences were now, in like looking back. It's like looking back at a video or a clip or a photo album or something.
Yeah. It's
You
I
know,
call it like a playback, like in football or like in
playback. Yeah,
athletics. They're
you
like
just watch
replay.
playback. Yeah,
Yeah.
but people will incorrectly say that they told me I had to come back, so I came back. No,
Mhm.
they can tell you that you have to come back. There's lots of people who tell you lots of things here on this side that you should do this and you should do that. And they told you, do you listen to everybody who tells you what to do? No, so I don't think that teach my students to make up your own mind. It doesn't matter if they are a light being or your dead grandmother. And I jokingly, seriously tell them, I said, your grandmother when she was alive here, and she was trying to hook you up, Janie, with this guy who makes all this money. He's so cute and everything. And your grandmother's trying to hook you up with this. Oh, you should marry that man. And you're like, yeah, but I don't really like the guy. Why would I marry him? So why would you listen to your dead grandmother when she's on the other side and now she's a light being? You didn't listen to her when she was here. It's like it doesn't mean that she knows everything just because she's died and gone to heaven, you know?
That's true. It's so true. It's interesting to even like consider that, but I never did. Like, you know what I mean? That you really do have free will, like pretty much in all dimensions of what is existence, I guess, right? Like that
Exactly.
we know of and stuff. At
Yeah.
least in the manner in which we seem to have like a
The
similar.
way I think of it anyway,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
You
yeah,
can't I
exactly.
can't prove I cannot prove that
Right,
our soul is eternal because
right, right.
eternal means without beginning and without end. So how can I prove that? I can't prove that,
Yeah.
but it seems like it lasts a very, very long time. I mean, I have memories that go back 6 or 8 thousand years. So who knows? Bridges like yeah, whatever. And I think I've probably been around for millions of years. Maybe not as a human. I don't know what.
I wanted you to get into
Mm.
the actual accident itself, like the drowning part of
Oh,
like what happened and stuff, and like how,
oh.
yeah, how old you were. I mean, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I was 21 at the time. I just turned 21. And but I'd been meditating for a couple of years before that. So, and it saved my life. So it's a really unusual NDE. It's not like a classic NDE that I talk about in here and that we've talked about already. My NDE was, and people who are like, "Whoa, that's not really even an NDE."
Yeah, yeah, no. And but that's what the point of this show is, right? It's just like, okay, well, what's your experience? Because we're just
Yeah,
here to kind of open our mind, and if people don't want to recognize it as one, that's okay. But I'm
exactly. I
curious.
don't care.
I'm
I
curious.
didn't know what an NDE was until about 7 years ago. I didn't even know what the term was.
Oh yeah.
I'd
I
I'd
think
heard it, but I didn't really pay attention. It's like, what? Yeah.
yeah, huh?
I didn't even know what the acronym stood for. And I'd heard the phrase NTA. But then somebody said, oh, you know that drowning thing that you talk about? That's an ND. I said, really?
So
Anyway,
you
what
started
happened was,
researching it more. Yeah.
yeah, so what happened was I went to San Diego. I grew up in the East Coast. So I was born in Boston, grew up in suburban Boston, and I went to school up in New Hampshire at Dartmouth College. And so I had never been, I don't think, I had never been west of uh, East Coast. I'd never left the East Coast. I've been up and down the East Coast to Florida and so forth. Never west of anything west of the Appalachian Mountains, I guess. Not even Ohio or anywhere, Western Pennsylvania. So I'm now all of a sudden at the Pacific Ocean. And I was going to a summer school program, an intensive language program there, like a year's worth, like 5, 6 hours a day, every day, 5 days a week, a year's worth of the language in a summer. So I met a whole bunch of people from all over the country because they came for that summer program, right? So I met this girl at registration, literally at the registration desk, and we were waiting in line and we're chatting. And she was from Massachusetts, and she was going to a college, Mount Holyoke College in Western Massachusetts. She had never been to the Pacific Ocean either. So I said, "Oh wow, let's go. Want to go to the beach?" Because we knew the beach was nearby, and we asked somebody how to get there. And it's literally you walk across campus. So after registration, I said, "I'll meet you back here at the registration desk." And because we didn't have class for a couple of days, and so we walked down to the beach. You go down this access road, and people who know San Diego, it's called Torrey Pines State Park, is right adjacent to UCSD, University of California, San Diego, in La Jolla, California. And you walk down this access road, and you're at Black's Beach. We didn't know it at the time, but Black's Beach it's a nude beach, but we didn't, we didn't know. We had our bathing suits on, and there was nobody there. Now on the weekend, it's packed, like everybody's naked. But we're there during the week. There's nobody there. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's never any lifeguards on the whole beach there at the state park. And Torrey Pines, people may recognize the name Torrey Pines State Park up on the plateau, 300 feet up high, is Torrey Pines, whatever the name of the golf course is. It's part of the PGA Tour. So
Okay.
it's beautiful views and everything. But it's 300 foot higher than the beach. So, and that's material to the story. So we go into the water, and it's a hot summer day, it's June, and beautiful, no clouds in the sky, I don't think. And it was just a beautiful blue sky. And walk up to about waist deep, and I dunk. And I start seeing her get smaller and smaller and smaller. Right immediately, the moment I lifted my feet up off the sand floor of the ocean, I see her getting smaller. And she's about 15, 20. Now she's 30 feet. Now she's 50 feet away. Now she's 100 feet away from me. And I see the 300-foot high cliffs going like this. I could see them getting smaller and smaller. That's how fast I was getting pulled out by a rip current,
Yeah.
a river in the ocean. And you can't see them. Um, and I couldn't feel it when I went into it. It must have just swept right in to the shore, and I was in shallow enough water that I didn't feel it. And then you're just in the middle of a moving body of water within the ocean. So
Oh God,
everything
that's so
around, so all the water around me does not feel like it's moving. It's like you're in a car. You don't feel like you're moving going 60, 80 miles an hour down the highway because everything in the car is stationary. The whole car is moving. So it's the same thing when you're in this rip current. The whole body of water around you for, I don't know, 100 feet or whatever is moving within the ocean. So you don't feel movement, but you can see it, relative motion. The cliffs are getting smaller. So I'm freaking out. I'm panicking. And I asked a friend of mine who's on my nonprofit board. He used to be a, merchant seaman, a sailor, captain of these big ocean-going vessels. I said, if the 300-foot high cliffs were about 3 or 4 inches high, how far out was I? And he said 1.7 miles. So I was 1.7 miles out, alone, no boats, nobody else, no other human beings in the water near us or visible. And I'm freaking out. So I'm swimming. I'm staying above, now I'm probably, I don't know, 60, 80 feet of water below me. And I'm treading water. I'm trying to swim back in, and I'm getting so exhausted after about 15 minutes of this. I'm getting so exhausted. I'm not going anywhere. My cortisol level and my adrenaline was probably through the roof, literally, in my biochemistry, because my fight or flight is majorly turned on, right? And so what does that do? If anybody has ever experienced fight or flight in extreme situation, it exhausts you really fast, really, really fast. You get tired faster than you normally would. So I'm swimming for 15 minutes, trying to swim in. I'm panicking. I'm getting more and more exhausted. I start going down in the ocean. So now I start seeing the surface of the ocean going farther and farther away from me. I'm holding my breath, and it's about 3 or 4 feet away or whatever. And I don't know. I don't know how this happened, but what happened was my mind popped out of my body. And so the separation of mind and body happened with me. And I knew what it was because I'd been meditating for 2 years. And so meditation saved my life. I'd had that experience dozens and dozens of times. Not every time I meditated, but dozens of times when I meditated. And so it was familiar. So I knew what was going on. And I desired, to use the word desire we talked about before in Jay's NDE, I just willed myself back in, but it wasn't like I forced myself, my mind. No, I said no. And then that was just enough to push my mind, sort of figuratively speaking, back into my body, my biological body. I struggled the 3 or 4 feet to the surface, and I just took a breath, caught my breath, didn't worry about like how far out I was. I just could breathe air again. And I think what happened, because then I turned around and I said, I just thought, take your time, don't panic, something like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
started swimming in. Now, I don't usually say this, but Maharishi came to my mind during that NDE, Janie. Yeah, while I was going down in the water, and then my mind popped out, and so I struggled, and I started swimming back in, and I actually started meditating when I was struggling to get back to the surface of the water too. I don't say that in these. I haven't said that, I think, before
Yeah,
in
but
stories.
great.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so I must have gotten out of the rip current because I started making headway.
Headway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Mm-hmm.
sure. And she said, I tried to keep my head above water. I did the side stroke. I didn't want to put my face in the water, and
Mm.
did the breaststroke, side stroke, tried to keep my head out of the water. And she said it took me an hour to swim back in. I was so exhausted. It was like these shipwreck movies where you
Yes.
crawl onto the shore and your feet are still in the water, and I passed out. And she said I passed out for about 20 minutes, a half hour, something. She didn't
I,
leave to get help because she wanted to make sure she could still see me.
mm-hmm. Okay. That's just like
Crazy.
yeah, that's crazy. And I really think it's neat that you were able to kind of give me a better sense of that feeling of being pulled in a riptide
Yeah.
and that sort of block of water
Yeah.
that it almost like its own container that's
Yeah.
moving through the ocean
It's just like
without
driving
saying
a car
it.
down the, it's just like driving a car down the highway.
Yeah,
You don't feel yourself. The
yeah,
thing in the car
yeah.
is still with you, not moving.
Exactly. It's kind of like it's even I don't know if it's kind of the same thing, maybe not, but the eye of the hurricane or the eye of the tornado. It's like completely like all this other stuff's going on over here, but it's just like it's
Still, yeah.
like
It's
it's
self-contained.
self-contained. It's order in chaos. I love too the connection that we can make to the ocean. You know, and how or you being sort of this like part of the ocean and also not being in the ocean at
Yeah,
the same time. And
yeah,
you got to kind of sense the two things and like,
yeah.
whoa,
Yeah, I
crazy.
didn't want to. I didn't want to be merging with the ocean. I mean, if I had had a classic NDE like a lot of people talk about,
Uh-huh.
and like, whoa, I'm feeling so peaceful. Wow, look at the light. I feel so expansive.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
so at peace. My body would still be going like this. And next thing you know, I'm 60 to 80 feet down, sitting on the bottom. There's no way I'd be able to get back up.
No way.
It,
And not only that, but it's like incredible that you had the capacity, right, to swim about a mile back
oh, yeah,
after all of that sort of struggle, even getting upward and everything.
exactly.
Oh my God. I literally just thinking about it, I already feel like out of breath and I can only imagine like the exhaustion that your body felt. Holy
So
moly.
exhausted. I literally passed out. I still remember passing out on the beach. Just,
Yeah, you're like crap. Because you had not one little ounce of energy. It was
yeah,
like,
I
you're
was,
napping, buddy.
I crawled up on the beach on my hands and knees, literally just pulled myself out of the water enough, and I just passed out.
It's like a scene of a movie, you
Oh,
know? And
100%.
and so in that moment, then I think it's also really neat, Rama, that you were able to connect the dots to the power just of meditation and how us getting comfortable with what
Yeah,
that is because there's all different forms of it. Earlier you were mentioning it's coming to my mind right now, so I just wanted to like touch on it just very quickly. You were mentioning how certain meditations they'll have you focus on something. Like
right.
let's say like a flame or your breath or something.
Yeah,
And there's another meditation where there's not really, it's the opposite of that, right? It's the paradoxicalness.
right.
You like hold space for that which wants to focus or like chase something while the other is sort of like the observer observing the thoughts and like you helping people understand that, which I think is super powerful. I do think because in the world we live in, our attention split a lot
Yeah,
and focus and concentration in terms of physical, like just biologically speaking, we're really very disturbed in that way. And so having some practice like that, even if it's just for 2 minutes where you're getting, you're just kind of looking at the flame. Obviously, your mind's going to probably go somewhere else, but just kind of bringing it back is no different than maybe when you're working on some emails that you got to get done. And then all of a sudden it's like squirrel. It's like it's almost Mr. Miyagiing yourself so
yeah.
that you do a little less of that.
So and what I teach is different because it's more of a letting go. I couldn't force. That's
Yeah,
the thing. Forcing in the ocean would have just made me drown, actually.
yeah, yeah.
So,
You had to
so
surrender. You
I,
literally had to let go and
I
surrender and let
let
yourself.
let go, and then at the same time, I did take action. So it's not the exact same thing as the meditation because the way I teach meditation is more of a letting go. Letting go to what? Letting go to our larger sense of self, but it's not. That's not the technique. That's the attitude. The technique is very specific on terms of how to get there in a
Mm,
way that's not controlling and not focusing, etc.
yeah.
But in the ocean situation, I was kind of in, to use your word, I kind of surrendered initially, but then took action specifically. And then my specific action that was different on my successful return trip versus the getting pulled out, the huge difference was not freaking out, not trying to get in really fast. Not trying was the big part that was eliminated from my successful return to the beach. And but I did take action
Yes.
without trying.
Yeah, it was like relaxed action. And in that way you kind of that's what you were doing.
Yeah,
Yeah. And in a weird way too, like there was a trust there. which also ties back to something
And
earlier.
not that I experienced at the time, but yeah, I was still pretty much freaking out because I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. But yeah,
Did you, okay, so when you woke up from your nap, just really quick, and then we're
yeah,
about probably we're at that time. Oh, because there's so much more I want to talk about, but I know we can only do so much each
yeah.
episode and everything. So when you wake up from, being exhausted on the beach and just kind of, I don't know if you remember anything, like if there was a dream or anything that you had, or you just really just like crashed, right?
I remember that I had nothing spiritual, no nothing.
Yeah.
I was just exhausted. I
Okay.
woke up and was like, holy fill in the blank. I
Exactly.
almost died. That and then she was like, "Oh my God, we obviously had a lot of probably F-bombs in there about in our conversation, although we had just met
That
an
is
hour
so,
before."
that's true too. I just like connected that dot. Like here you are with this stranger and she had this like powerful moment with you. And
Yeah,
nothing is ever, an accident, right? Like everything is always in divine order.
I never,
My
I never even saw her after that program. And again, it's like,
was there anything significant for you post that? Because at this point you're already meditating, you're already believing
right,
in something bigger than yourself.
right.
Um, did it open up the door to more metaphysical activity, or did you not really notice much? Did it change your perspective or relationships in any way? Were you able to like enjoy la vida dulce, like cinnamon rolls and brownies in a more intense way? Or maybe you
No,
didn't eat that back
none of
then.
that. And the only thing that it did was made me scared of going in the ocean and lifting my feet up. That's
Oh,
seriously. I
yeah.
no, I did not have any. Like a lot of people have some ND experience and they'll have this major spiritual awakening and stuff. I was already having spiritual awakenings before that. And
That's why I was wondering if like age, like did it even have an impact on you? Because at this point you're like
I mean,
totally understanding.
maybe it did on some energetic level that I'm unaware of, but not consciously. And I didn't have any, I was already having like crazy experiences of my mind experiencing the huge football stadium part of itself already, which is why when that happened during this, it didn't surprise it. I mean, it surprised me, but it didn't shock me. It didn't, it was familiar to me.
Yeah.
So I continued to have those experiences, but I had, like I said, I'd already had those experiences before. And then, my past life memories opened up about 4 or 5 years, 5 or 6 years later or something. So who knows? You could say, could you say that that was a factor that impacted my past life memories started opening up spontaneously? I've never had a past life regression. Could they open up spontaneously, 5, 6 years later? Sure, you could say that. I mean, but we will never know. You know what I mean? Can't do an experiment. I don't know for
It is
sure.
pretty neat though that the work that you do, that in some capacity also, kind of plays into like your
Yeah,
overall arc, like overarching work
yeah.
and mission and everything. So I think that's really neat that that's a part of your story.
Yeah,
Again, things don't happen
it's
fast.
only a recent part of my story, as I told you, because I didn't know what NDE stood for until about 7 years.
That's true. You just started using it.
Yeah, so people started saying, "Oh, you got to tell. Oh, I want to interview about that. I want to ask you about that." I'm like, "Oh, okay." It was
Yeah.
just another experience that I had, another one of the bajillion life experiences that I've had.
Yeah, I think for anybody who is watching this and have already been kind of researching it or looking into it, or maybe this is new, and there's a doctor, his name is Eben Alexander. His story is really powerful. And funny enough, he's a neurologist, like a doctor, and he was one of the leading experts when it came to debunking these near-death experiences.
Before he had this near-death experience.
Yeah, like before, exactly before. And then what happened to him, I won't get into the details, but it basically ate away at his brain and fried, right? Like it turned off all the parts of the brain he was saying is responsible for crossing over the other side and having these
Right?
experiences that,
He used to say when he was debunking it, He
Yes.
used to say it was because of this part of the brain and that part of the brain, but then he had this very rare, weird disease, illness, some illness, not a disease, an
Yeah.
illness that struck his brain and fried certain parts of his brain, and then he had this NDE and so forth. So he's written this book. I've spoken on at conferences with him. Uh,
Okay, cool. So you've met him.
the interesting thing about him that I point out to people is, and he talks about it sometimes in his talks, is it he grew up very, very Christian. So naturally, as we've already said, his view of the afterlife is very Christian. It's a very Christianish filter that he's viewing it through. Which
Right,
is, and
right.
again, and that's not denigrating it. It's just a fact that that's what happens. People, they filter it through their particular filter. Oh,
So I know that there's all these experiences that we've heard about where it's more of like this bliss and this very peaceful like state, and it's really beautiful. But I also know that there's other near-death experiences where they go to the other side and it feels a lot scarier or it's a lot darker.
sure, yeah, yeah. I have had clients who've had NDEs like that. And you don't hear a lot about them. There's some on YouTube and so forth, but you don't generally, I mean, they're not going to invite people to the, near-death experience conference and hey, tell us about your terrible NDE where, you went to what you call hell and all this stuff. But I've helped people who've had, just call them negative or darker near-death experiences. And the bottom line with that is, um, in every case, and I've handled a lot of cases like that with some of my clients who just privately, they confidentially come to me and I help them. Um, every case, it's been because they've had some trauma in their past or some belief. It could be a combination of any of these things, a belief in their current mind or their mind at the time when they had the NDE, obviously, that mind of that present mind of theirs, um, a fear about what happens after they die and so forth. Um, it's very common, not always, doesn't always happen, because nothing always happens. So but it's very common amongst people who come out of very fundamental, very kind of fire and brimstone kind of religious belief systems.
Yeah.
That's been my experience anyway,
Hmm.
with my clients. Um, and which would make sense because they're inculcated with this whole belief that there's this punishment system, et cetera, and there's all this terrible stuff that could happen to you after you die if you haven't done this and you haven't done that. And that's why, what I teach is to reduce our fears about stuff, whether it's about death and dying or anything, because that's what's going to increase, your sense of confidence and stability and not be so prone to uh, uh, feeling that you could be able to be controlled by other forces or other beings or whoever you want to name these other beings. you know
Hmm.
and so it's not my experience either. It's not my experience that there is any punishment on the other side,
Right.
uh, that there's no structural punishment. In other words, structural, what I refer to structural is what most people's fear is. They think that it is part of the structure of the system. Once you die, that you're going through this whole judgment process. And
Yeah.
some people will come back from NDEs saying that they do experience that. But again, my experience with those types of people is that they went to the other side and had their NDE with that existing belief system already.
Yep. And whatever traumas, yeah, the belief system with the trauma over there, and it's still
That's
kind of filtered. It still ended up filtering. That's why
yeah,
the idea of being able to get into that self-liberation
Yeah.
from the inside with your own self while you're still in body here, which to me is like heaven on earth. It's finding that inner
Yeah.
freedom without all this externality and these ideologies and belief structures that are
Right.
tied to punitive judgment for making a mistake. And
Yeah.
that's like, and that's one of the things that I think you and I also agreed on is that
Yeah.
I feel like, and there's, again, I don't want to disrespect any religion, but I do believe that any religions that are not adhering to the laws that govern the universe, and I feel like the three major ones, they all kind of like connect in that there is this out external God that's looking down, that's, gonna judge you. And, your peace is only on the other side. So do what you need to do so that you can. And women are not given a seat at the table. There's a hierarchy, and God is male. It's not the Alpha and Omega, and all these
Right.
things, which
Yeah.
again, I don't know if I'll use all of that in the show, but
Yeah.
uh,
No, no,
it's
I think that's right. I think it has been a male dominated system because
right.
why? If you think about it, it's not spiritually that doesn't make any spiritual sense. Why does the males tend to dominate all of these major religions? Because there were men who created all of these rules.
Yes,
And it's so
exactly.
it's a lot of it's human created. I would say all, in my opinion, it's
Yeah.
all human created
Yeah.
and male created. And
Hmm.
then forget because the other thing is it's male created and oh, by the way, it's my male free will that decides what the rules are
That's
that all
right.
of you males and females need to follow. That's really, if you want to distill down organized religion in that sense, that's really what it is. You cut out all the BS, all the rest of the trappings, all the candles, all the Latin, all the this and the that. That's really what it is. And
Mhm.
is that really what I consider spirituality? No.
Yeah.
Um, it's a form of control. It's another form of way to control other people,
Hmm.
uh, other beings, other people,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of that. But
Yeah.
that's not to me spirituality. Spirituality is a sense of wholeness of who we all are. In other words, what I mean by wholeness, to me, it means like we could like war or not like war. We could be in between. We could be a discerner of when to use force is appropriate and when it's not, and why it's not appropriate in situations that can create worse situations from that. So a discerning mind, to me, that is what free will is all about. It's all about these choices. But, it's not just about making any old choice. I mean, yes, free will is that. But to me, what life can be about,
Yes.
in my opinion, what life should be about, not from a judgment standpoint, but what should be about in order to promote greater happiness and contentment and inner peace. That's what I mean by should. In
Mhm.
order to move more in that direction is a more educated way, a more thoughtful, a more rational, a more consistent way of behaving in aligning our thoughts, desires, and actions in our behavior to
Yeah.
move us more as a individually, but also as a group. Oh, and one thing that you and I talked about before we hit the record button here, we wanted to say is that, you don't have to be religious. You
Mhm.
don't have to have a cultural or a religious belief in the afterlife. I never did. I never did. The reason I think so many people default to viewing God or a gods or plural or whatever as controllers is because they feel so out of control themselves inside. And I think that lack of feeling of control is fundamentally based in a disconnection with oneself because one's identification incorrectly, most 8 billion people on planet Earth, human beings, incorrectly or incompletely they incompletely identify themselves with what I've referred to in the past as this 8-inch bucket part of their mind. And they forget they're not because they are not connected consciously with the football stating part of their mind. Therefore, they think that they need to control the ping pong balls in that 8-inch bucket better. That's what's going to make them happier and make them feel more secure. All that does is move the ping pong balls around and makes them feel actually less secure because they cannot control what they cannot control. And so, I've been saying this for thousands of years. You and I've talked about this. Control what we can control and let go of what we cannot control. That's the thing. Now,
Yeah.
that's an easy maxim to say. It's harder to practice. But to
Mhm.
me, that's the sweet spot. That's where inner peace and contentment reside. And that's where I help get my clients to that
Yeah.
point.
I call it the Goldilocks spot, that sweet middle spot, like right in that middle point of paradoxicalness, right, of our
Yeah,
own selves and of option, like free will,
yeah,
and how we can choose to use the power of our voice, right, and even our hands to like uplift and create and
right.
generate goodness. And we also have the other option too. And I think you and I are in alignment in that. Um, if we put the word God to creator, the order within the chaos, pasmesa is that peace within where you're rectifying your order and your chaos, and the one you can choose which one you want to be more of. And there's some ways and tools and practices and principles and ways we can live and love that will allow us to function. This is what's so beautiful about this stuff. When you honor love and life and your own self, and you know thyself, and you choose mindfully, like you choose generative things and healthy connections and safety and all that stuff, the benefits in terms of health and vitality go up. And I think it's pretty interesting in the Bible, it says God is light. And when you are coming from a place of unconditional love and healthy boundaries and, taking care of yourself, knowing thyself, understanding these things, and, like every day giving yourself a little tender, loving care to nurture yourself, the benefits are incredible. Your brain is healthier, you operate more optimally, and it's easier to be the peace that you want to see in the world because that's where it starts. It starts with us. And
Self-love. But
yeah,
the problem, the challenge for most people is they don't love. They think that self-love means loving everything about yourself, and I teach that that's a mistake. No, you can love lots of stuff about yourself, and you can look at some stuff that you don't like, and those are the stuff that you may want to improve if you can, but
yeah,
stuff you can improve.
yeah.
Like
Like you have to leave a
I'm
little
not
bit
gonna
of room for that.
I'm not going to grow a full head of hair in again. That ain't happening biologically for me. But have I accepted my male pattern baldness and I shave my head?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
But
I
that
totally agree with you.
acceptance of everything about yourself to me is what we should mean by self-love.
I
Right?
agree, man. And that's what, and even like going back to Yeshua, like that's ultimately what Yeshua is saying. It's like, hey, acknowledge all of yourself, not just parts, right? That's another part of the healing journey and the transformation when you work on yourself. And in a way that, and that's maybe a word that we can like use for the next episode is acceptance, because acceptance also ties into like grief and loss and, highs and lows and the parts of ourselves that we extricate, I think that's a word, or like kind of cut off because growing up, others seem to not like them so much. And then
Yeah.
we end up, cutting ourselves off. But then that's another reason why we're so stressed and anxiety ridden. And a lot of times why we feel lost and things like that is because we've severed ourselves from all of ourselves
Yeah.
and and the bigger picture at large that we're a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. The acceptance, we need to connect with ourselves, as we said several times already in this session, our larger sense of self, which does not necessarily mean too many double negatives. Let me say it positively, which means that we can still improve ourselves by getting rid of, as you say, getting rid of the stuff that we don't that's not serving us anymore. Our patterns of behavior, certain things that we can change within ourselves. The challenge, though, for most people when it comes to free will is they forget about other people's free will and how it can influence and affect oneself. And because hundreds of people, arguably thousands, arguably you could say billions of people are affecting you indirectly, very, very, very indirectly. But there are dozens of people who are affecting you pretty directly. And there's probably hundreds of people who are affecting you directly that indirectly that you don't even know. Like, I don't know anybody in Congress, but they change laws. I don't know anybody in Homeland Security. I don't know anybody in the White House in the United States. But do they affect me if all of a sudden Homeland Security starts going after Asian people? Yeah,
Mm.
that could affect me. So, I'm just saying, we don't have control over every other mind out there. So
Right.
control what we can control, which is ourselves, and we can't even control everything about ourselves, but we have more control over ourselves than other people for sure. So, do what you can do and don't get stressed out but what you don't have control over.
And that is a practice. It's just a daily practice
It
every
is.
day. And
It
you and
is.
I have been at this. You've been at it longer than I have, but I'm like 15 years into this know thyself journey,
Yeah,
accept thyself.
yeah,
I like that you touched on that because earlier I was saying something about acceptance and I wanted to make that point and I didn't. And you brought it back to we can know that we're growing and evolving some things about ourselves that no longer serve us, while at the same time accepting ourselves as we are, where we are in the
yeah.
moment, the journey,
Including the warts. Including
ex
the warts.
including the warts. And there's,
Like,
yeah,
they're not mutually exclusive. So it doesn't mean to be passive. When we
or
say
no,
acceptance does not mean that we're not
passivity.
meaning passivity. No, 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 no.
We can be assertive and still be compassionate with ourselves.
Exactly. Yes.
There's a difference.
Yes.
And I think all of us are collectively, we're all going through some growing pains right now. And we're all having to make some serious choices about what our priorities are and what we believe in and how much longer do we want to feed into the fight between the red and the blue and the black and the white and the straight and the gay and the Muslim and the Christian and da 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 da. Like, what's the thing that unites us as
Yeah.
humanity? We lost sight of that a long time ago, and I think that's where we're coming back to. And so it's sad that for now we're still living in a world where so many of the leaders are operating from that superiority-inferiority operating system.
Yeah.
Um,
Big time fear.
Big time fear. And that's one thing I just want to say to people. It's like acknowledge the fear, but also make sure that you're feeding yourselves, like this, your soul, and connecting with people that are loving and doing things that bring you joy and pray. And because
Don't
that's kind of a weird
so much,
spot to be in.
don't watch so much news.
Mm-hmm.
Don't
Mm-hmm.
watch.
Yeah, stay informed, but don't plug in and then you're just like, ooh, and you're just
Yeah.
like getting the noise, right? There's the
Right.
noise, and then there's sort of that more stillness and the quietness. There's a war going on within here, and then we're like infecting each other with this war-likeness.
Yeah.
And so we want to heal that cruelty. We want to
Yeah.
just learn how to be with all of our emotions in a way that we're processing them properly,
Yeah.
grounding, and just doing our best to remember what really matters.
Just to be clear, when I say cruelty,
Yeah.
I'm referring to the enjoyment of somebody else's unhappiness. Yeah. I'm not talking about self-defense. I'm not talking about, look, the 800-pound gorilla. I mean, or I don't know, the elephant in the room these days is the whole Trump Epstein files thing. If somebody like that was abusing my daughter, I would go after them.
Oh, yeah. And that's another thing too. I'm so
So
glad
this
you
is
brought.
not about passivity, and it's not about ignoring self-defense, and it's not about taking somebody out who's attacking you, but enjoyment of other people's suffering by causing them pain and suffering is how I define cruelty. And there's a lot of that going on in the world today, and it's all over our media. every day, and it gets a lot of eyeballs. I get it. We need to gird ourselves by educating ourselves that that is a short-term happiness fix for the cruel bully. It is short-term. Now, I'm a realist also. I'm an idealistic realist, which means that I know that the bullies out there are probably going to be bullies for the next million lifetimes because they've figured it out and they know how to manipulate other people. But I'm here to try to educate the non-bullies out there to understand how the bullies are manipulating them.
Thank you. Yes, it's like we need to empower those that are in that other position so that they're able to spot it and be able to like,
Right.
use their voice
Yep.
and feel that strength from the
Right.
inside.
Right.
And so I really, yeah, I like that a
Yeah.
lot. And
They're
then
out
also too
there
is like the
usually.
bystanders. A
Yeah.
lot of us are like these bystanders,
Yes.
and there's more of us than there are the bullies. Like, what if we all just learn how to speak up?
Yes.
Like protect each other and protect, protect one another, ourselves first and foremost, right? And knowing how to do that in a way that's healthy, versus like protecting yourself so much that you're guarded and you block everybody out from
Yeah.
your life.
And
And
there's ways to deal with bullies that's not just by fighting them
thank you.
in the traditional way.
Right.
Bullies are not very smart people. They can be outsmarted. And the problem that I have in what I've been observing for many years, more recently, is the lack of wisdom and intelligence of how people are dealing with the bullies. They're playing with the bullies or trying to, you know, defeat the bullies on the bullies' terms instead of coming up with their own way to outsmart the bullies. That's a whole other discussion.
I know. You're
Uh,
right.
and,
It
and
really is about out intelligencing them.
you have to out intelligence them because by outsmarting them, because they have really got it down.
You're reminding me of a line, at least there's scripture that Yeshua says something about being as gentle as a dove, but as shrewd as a snake, or something
Yes.
like that.
Yep, as wise as his name. He said that.
I get
And
it now.
forget that part. You need to be as wise as a snake. That means you need to be discerning and you see what's going on and you act accordingly.
Bingo, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. These are my drumsticks. I always have them close by. One of the episodes I want to touch on is all the different ways in which I process my grief or like my frustration or my sadness and things like that. And yeah, like going to town on some drums sometimes or just, with the drumsticks really helps. But yes, it's like bringing a It's like, all right, guys, we got to wake up our rock starness
Right.
and
That's right. Yeah.
and get with the program, the peace
Yeah.
program. And it's not like you said, that whole idea. I need to put my drumsticks on. I'm gonna keep using it.
I listened to the Rolling Stones last night, so go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. But yeah, it's time for a fusion. Like the Eastern side have some things correct. The Western, like, what are all
Yeah.
the pieces that make sense? And then I feel like all of us have like a piece of the puzzle, but when you bring it
Yeah.
together, it's the wholeness
Yeah.
of what spirituality and what God is and, life and energy and like all this stuff. But we separate it and it's like, no, it's this and that. And some things just, I call it penduluming. It goes way too far.
Right.
I went into that space,
Right.
all love and light, all this stuff. And I had to go into that space for a little bit. Thank God I was only in it for about maybe a year and a half, 2 years. But I understand now what integration means. I'm all about protecting one another. Like I get humanity is in a state of insanity, but we can return back to our sanity and put the word civil back in civilization. Going back to earlier, we were saying like the thinking, it's our thinking that's in our consciousness that's keeping us in this ideology where we can use war to create peace. and that we can use destruction and like, you know what I mean, to create safety in other places in the world. And that just shouldn't be happening anywhere, period. This is about power and it's about profit. It's not about peace. It's not about safety. It's not
Yeah,
about the people. And
yeah.
so it's time for us to, wisen up, right? Like you said, through from the heart and the head. So anyway, that's my piece on all that. I feel like we left off on acceptance. I think next time, definitely touching on reincarnation to
Yeah,
some
we talk
degree.
about reincarnation. We can talk about, and if depending on what's going on with this Iran war thing,
True.
we can talk, weave that into that too, because with past lives and stuff, what people don't realize, and it might be helpful for some people to realize, certainly the audience that we have that's going to be more open to this anyway than the Joe Blow six-pack audience out there.
Uh-huh.
It's that a lot of this kind of behavior that's acceptant of war
Hmm.
is based on repeat patterns of behavior in the past where people have followed. Make a note of this. We should
I'll
weave
make a note. I'll make a note right here.
this. We need to weave this factor in,
Okay.
which is the factor of people's past life comfort,
Imprints.
their
Oh,
comfort with authoritarian rulers.
yes, yes,
If
yes.
you look back at humanity, go back 10,000, 40,000 years, that, probably we have history that goes back 6,000 years. But I'm guessing you go back, we got a historical record of this fact, 6,000 years, but you go back a million years, or however many years the people claim that, we humans have been here. It's been an authority figure, ruling figure society.
Mm,
Humanity has been. And it's
mm-hmm,
only been very, very recent in the last several hundred years where this notion of a democracy started surfacing even a little bit in ancient Greece,
mm-hmm.
and then more explicitly in the United States 250 years ago. So if you look at that from a past life standpoint, what you have is a lots, billions and billions of people who are pretty much they're bought into the fact that authoritarian rule is the way to go.
Yep. It's like they bought it hook, line, and sinker way back in the day, and we've normalized it and just kind of made it seem like, hey, it's just kind of part of life. Like this is just kind of how we have to do things to get things
Yeah,
done. Like
yeah,
y'all want safety, like this
yeah,
is what it costs.
yeah,
And it's like that's not true. That's not
yeah,
true. All for the sake of what? What really? It's all these like silly fights.
yeah,
Anyway, but yeah, so yes, I agree with
yeah.
you 100%.
It weaves right into this, and it just kind of introducing the notion to people to just to reflect on their complicity in terms of pushing this authoritarian shit. I mean,
I agree, man. It goes back to that bystander. There's like people that
yeah,
just kind of like stay and not really saying anything, or that are like perpetuating it and really being like, yeah, yeah. It's like we have to take a step back and really pause.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I agree
yeah.
100%. I was thinking we only had one or two more episodes, but we have more because, I wanted to touch on the reincarnation and about suicide. Anything that you want to leave us with, maybe as we close up this episode with the world being in the state that it's in right now?
I think to help us maintain some sense, some semblance of balance in this crazy world that we're living in right now that seems so imbalanced, we need to have a longer, broader perspective on things than just what's going on today, or just even what's going on in the last 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 years. And remember and recognize that things are on planet Earth, amongst humanity, better than they have been in the past. In the distant past is what I mean. That there was a 1 in 5 chance, 1 in 5 chance of dying a horrifically violent death not that long ago. Whereas today, it's less than 1%. Now, I'm not justifying what's going on in the Middle East or other parts of the world in Africa, because I have clients in Africa who are in countries involved in civil war and so forth. I have clients in 70 different countries who report to me terrible things going on in many of those countries. So I'm not saying that's not happening, and I'm not denigrating that. I'm just saying we have improved as a race, as a human race. And so have a historical perspective on this. Understand that, things have improved over time. And I hope that they will, improve from where they are today, because what's going on right now worldwide, I have concerns about. So I'm not a Pollyanna about this. I have significant concerns about it. So I just wanted to leave people with a little bit more of a positive perspective on how they view this terrible state of the world right now.
Yes, and hopefully some of the information that we've shared on the episodes thus far can help you get through this difficult time that we're all going through, as a human race, and that it can bring you some comfort. You can go to his website. I know that he has free consultations for people. Again, he works with people all over the world. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And again, be sure to power up that peace within, whatever that is for you, that you find your own peace and that you can live from that space and bring that into the world. Thank you, Kelvin, for everything that you shared. And yeah, I'm looking forward to next time when I meet with you again. Peace be in you, everyone. Paz Mesa.
Thank you for watching Good Grief, meeting loss with presence one wave at a time. Be sure to subscribe to Rise Above TV and tune in for the next episode, where we'll share more insights about grief so you can face it mindfully.